I knew it. People like you never have money to pay.
A black man in a wrinkled polo stood at the register, motionless. The shift manager grabbed the guest check off the counter.
You don't have $18? Then why are you wasting my time?
Walk away, Denise.
Then a black waitress crossed the floor. The manager blocked her. She reached past him, took the check, wrote 3 words, slid it in front of the old man. "Sit down, sir." He looked down. Only 3 words. His hands went still. No one knew what those 3 words just set into motion, but within 72 hours, this restaurant would never be the same, and everything in this restaurant would flip. 3 weeks earlier, Raymond Alcott sat alone in a corner office 42 floors above Atlanta. The skyline stretched behind him. Glass, steel, a city built on ambition. But Raymond wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at a leather notebook on his desk. 40 pages, 40 entries, every one of them the same word: failed. On the wall behind him hung a framed photograph. A 16-year-old black kid in a grease-stained apron standing behind a sink full of dishes. That kid was Raymond. 31 years ago, washing dishes for $6 an hour at a diner that didn't bother learning his name. The owner called him Boy. The customers didn't call him anything at all. He built Alcott Hospitality Group from that dishwasher station. 1 diner became 2. 2 became 10. 10 became 41. Magnolia Table, a chain of family restaurants stretching across the Southeast. Not fancy, not fast food. The kind of place where a family of 4 could eat for under $50 and leave feeling like somebody gave a damn about their evening. Raymond never married. No children. The company was the closest thing he had to a legacy. And now, at 67, with a cardiologist telling him to slow down and a board of directors telling him to sell, he was running out of time. The board had an offer on the table. Ridgewell Capital, a private equity firm out of New York, wanted to buy Alcott Hospitality for $410 million. Clean deal, fast close. The board loved it. Every single member voted yes. Every member except Raymond. He'd sat through their presentation. He'd seen the projections. He knew exactly what Ridgewell would do. Cut staff by 30%, shrink portions, replace the servers with ordering tablets, and squeeze every restaurant until the margins bled. In 3 years, Magnolia Table would be unrecognizable. In 5, it would be dead. "You can teach someone to read a P&L in a weekend," Raymond told the board. "You can't teach someone to look a stranger in the eye and mean it." They gave him 90 days. Find a successor, someone to run the company with the values Raymond built it on, or the sale goes through. 90 days. No extensions. That was 4 months ago. Raymond's plan was simple, and he told no one. He would visit every single Magnolia Table location, all 41, in disguise. Not as an auditor, not as a consultant, as a nobody. A tired old man in a wrinkled polo and a $12 Casio watch eating meatloaf alone in a corner booth. At each restaurant, he would run 1 test. Just 1. At the end of his meal, he'd pretend he couldn't pay. Empty wallet, empty pockets, the confused face, the stammered apology. And then he'd wait. He wasn't watching for policy. He wasn't checking training manuals. He was watching for one thing. What does this person do when a stranger is in trouble and nobody's going to reward them for helping? 40 restaurants, 40 tests. Location 1, Birmingham. The server called the manager. The manager asked Raymond to leave. Failed. Location 12, Savannah. The server was polite. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't cover that." She looked at the floor when she said it. Failed. Location 27, Raleigh. The server offered to call someone for him. Kind. But she didn't reach into her own pocket. Failed. Location 36, Jacksonville. The server laughed. "Happens all the time, buddy, but I'm not a charity." Failed. 40 restaurants, 40 versions of the same answer. Somebody else's problem. Raymond sat in his office flipping through the notebook. 40 pages of failed. One blank page left. Page 41. The last restaurant, the smallest location, the lowest revenue in the chain. Location 41, Durham, North Carolina. His assistant knocked on the door. Your flight to New York is Friday. Ridgewell wants the signed letter of intent by Monday. Raymond closed the notebook. Cancel New York. Sir? Durham. I'm going to Durham. She paused. And if this one's the same as the others? Raymond looked at the framed photo of the 16-year-old dishwasher. The kid who built all of this from nothing. The kid who once stood at a register with empty pockets and nobody in the room who cared. Then I signed the papers, he said, and I learned to play golf. He picked up his car keys, walked out, didn't look back at the skyline. One restaurant left. One blank page. Magnolia Table, location 41, sat at the end of a strip mall in Durham, between a laundromat and a check-cashing store. The paint on the sign was peeling. The parking lot had 3 cars in it. A bell above the door jingled when anyone walked in, and it didn't jingle often. Denise Okafor arrived at 6:15 a.m., 15 minutes before her shift. She always did. She tied her apron in the hallway, the same faded apron she'd worn for 4 years, washed so many times the green had turned gray. She tucked her pen behind her ear. Then she opened her server book and looked at the small photo taped inside. Her daughter, Amara, 7 years old, missing 2 front teeth, grinning like the world was made of candy. Denise closed the book, took a breath, walked onto the floor. By 11 a.m., she had 9 tables. The other server, a college kid named Jason who'd been there 3 months, had 4, including the window section where tips ran higher. Denise didn't complain. She never did. She just moved faster. Table 2, a couple arguing in whispers. She refilled their water without interrupting and left extra napkins. The woman's eyes were red. Table 5, a construction worker eating alone, mud still on his boots. She brought his coffee before he flagged her down. You look like a man who needs this first, she said. He laughed for the first time that day. Table 9. An elderly man shuffled in around noon. Thin jacket, white hair. He moved slow, like his body was apologizing for still needing things. He sat at the two-top near the register and studied the menu for a long time. Too long. The kind of long that meant he was counting in his head. He ordered a bowl of soup, the cheapest thing on the menu, $4.75. When it came, he ate slowly. He tore his bread into small pieces like he was making it last. Denise watched from across the floor. She'd seen this before. She'd seen it dozens of times, the careful way people eat when they're not sure where the next meal is coming from. When he finished, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a handful of coins, quarters, dimes, nickels. He spread them on the table and started counting. His lips moved as he added. His fingers trembled. He was 60 cents short. He counted again. Same number. He stared at the coins like they'd betrayed him. Denise was already walking toward him. She didn't wait. She didn't calculate. She picked up his guest check, pulled the pen from behind her ear, and wrote 3 words on the bottom. It's on me. She placed it face down on the table. You're all set, sir. Have a good afternoon. The man looked up. His eyes were wet. Miss, I can't let you... It's handled, Denise said. You just worry about getting home safe. She was halfway back to table 5 when the voice hit her from behind. Denise. Terry Marshall, the local manager, stood in the doorway of the back office, arms crossed, face tight. Terry wasn't a bad person. She was a tired one. 43 years old, managing a restaurant that corporate forgot, answering to a regional director who'd never set foot in the building. My office, now. Denise followed her in. Terry closed the door. On the corkboard behind the desk, a printed email was pinned at eye level. Subject line, Final warning, Okafor D. Unauthorized comps. Sent by Phil Barker, Regional Director, Southeast Division. That's the 3rd time this quarter, Denise. Phil's tracking it. The man had 60 cents, Terry. I covered $4 from my tips. I know what you covered, and I know what Phil's gonna do if it happens again. Terry pulled open her desk drawer. Inside, 11 old guest checks, each one in Denise's handwriting, each one marked with the same 3 words. It's on me. Terry had been saving them, hiding them from Phil's audits. She didn't fully understand why. She just couldn't throw them away. 11 times in 2 years, Terry said quietly. Phil sees one more, you're done. Not a warning, not a write-up. Done. Denise looked at the checks, her own handwriting staring back at her. 11 strangers she'd fed with her own money, her tip money, her rent money, her Amara's new shoes money. She didn't apologize. She folded the email, put it in her apron pocket, and said, That man counted coins for a bowl of soup, Terry. I'm not going to watch that. She walked back to her section. Table 5 needed a refill. Table 2's couple had stopped arguing. The woman was almost smiling. Denise picked up a coffee pot and kept moving. Behind her, Terry stood in the doorway watching her work. She shook her head. Not in disapproval, in something closer to awe. 11 times, Terry whispered to herself. Who does that? Raymond drove south on I-85 in a rented Buick with a dent in the passenger door. No driver, no assistant, just a thermos of black coffee and the leather notebook on the seat beside him. He'd made this drive 40 times before. Different highways, different cities, same ritual, same result. Somewhere around the Virginia border, he'd stopped expecting anything. The hope had drained out of him the way coffee drains from a cracked thermos, slow, steady, and impossible to stop. The test was simple. That was the point. He'd walk into the restaurant dressed like a man the world had stopped noticing. Wrinkled polo, khaki pants with a stain on the knee, scuffed shoes, the $12 Casio watch he'd bought at a gas station outside Birmingham 4 months ago. A replacement for the Patek Philippe that now lived in his glove box like a secret. He'd sit, he'd order, he'd eat slowly, and at the end of the meal, he'd open his wallet, find it empty, and wait. That was the whole test. No rubric, no scorecard, just one question. What does this person do when a stranger can't pay and nobody's watching? He wasn't looking for charity, he wasn't looking for a speech, he was looking for a reflex. The kind of response that comes from somewhere deeper than training, deeper than policy, deeper than fear of getting in trouble. He was looking for someone who physically could not watch another person suffer without moving toward them. In 40 restaurants, he hadn't found it. Not once. Some servers had been kind. A few had been genuinely sorry. One woman in Savannah had tears in her eyes when she told him she couldn't cover his bill. But sorry and kind weren't enough. Raymond needed someone who would act, who would reach into their own pocket, knowing it would cost them, knowing nobody would thank them, knowing it might get them fired, and do it anyway. 40 times, nobody did. Raymond passed the Durham exit sign. 12 miles. He turned off the radio. The silence in the car was thick, the kind that shows up when a man is arguing with himself. Maybe the test was wrong. Maybe asking a minimum wage server to pay for a stranger's meal was too much. Maybe the kind of person he was looking for had been beaten out of the workforce years ago, ground down by systems that rewarded efficiency over empathy, metrics over mercy. Maybe he should just sign the papers and let Ridgewell have it. He pulled into the parking lot of Magnolia Table, location 41. It was smaller than he remembered from the corporate photos. The sign needed paint. The parking lot had 4 cars, including his. A bell hung over the front door, the old-fashioned kind that actually rang. Through the window, he could see a woman tying an apron. She tucked something into a small book. He couldn't see what. She moved quickly, with purpose, like someone who'd been doing this a long time and still hadn't decided it was beneath her. He didn't know her name. He didn't know she'd been written up 3 times for feeding strangers with her own money. He didn't know that a regional director he'd never met was preparing to fire her. He didn't know that in a drawer behind the manager's desk, 11 guest checks with her handwriting were hidden like evidence of a crime that wasn't a crime at all. All he knew was this: 1 restaurant left, One blank page. He turned off the engine, took the Patek Philippe off his wrist, and placed it in the glove box. Snapped the Casio on. Checked himself in the rearview mirror. A tired black man in a wrinkled polo. Nobody special. Nobody at all. He picked up the notebook, stepped out, walked toward the door. The bell rang. The corner booth had a crack in the vinyl that ran diagonally from the seat to the backrest. Raymond sat down and placed the notebook under the table, between his thigh and the wall. A napkin and a pencil. If anyone asked, he was working a crossword. Denise appeared within 40 seconds. Not rushed, not performative. She just materialized, like she'd been watching the door and the empty booth and the distance between the two, and had already done the math. "Corner booth," she said. "You look like a corner booth kind of guy." "What makes you say that?" "Corner booth people like watching without being watched." She set down a menu. "Coffee?" "Black." She didn't write it down. When she came back 30 seconds later, the coffee was hot and in a mug without a chip on the rim. Raymond noticed that. He ordered meatloaf with mashed potatoes and sweet tea. Then he watched. Denise had 9 tables. Jason had 4, including the window section where tips ran higher. She didn't mention it. She just moved faster, like water finding its path. No wasted steps, no wasted words. Table 3, a mother with a toddler. The kid launched a sippy cup for the 3rd time. Denise picked it up, wiped it, handed it back. "He's got a good arm. Might want to call a scout." The mother laughed, the kind that escapes before you can stop it. Table 6. A man in a suit eating fast, checking his phone. Denise refilled his coffee without asking and placed the check at the edge. No small talk, no hovering. She read the situation and gave him exactly what he needed. Speed. Table 2. A woman alone, stirring coffee in circles. Denise set down a fresh packet of tissues beside her water glass. Didn't say a word, just touched her shoulder as she passed. The woman's stirring slowed. Raymond wrote on his napkin, "She sees people." He underlined it twice. He'd watched hundreds of servers in 4 months. The efficient ones, fast, accurate, forgettable. The friendly ones, big smiles, scripted warmth. The indifferent ones, body present, mind clocked out. Denise was none of these. She wasn't performing kindness. She was incapable of not being kind. It was structural, load-bearing, like a wall that holds up the building without anyone knowing it's there. 2 hours passed. He watched her handle a spill without sighing, a complaint without flinching, a rude teenager without losing her warmth. He watched her remember a regular's order. "2 sugars, splash of cream, right, Mr. Davis?" And the old man's face when he realized someone still knew how he took his coffee. Below, she sees people, Raymond wrote. She remembers them. At 2:15 p.m., his plate was empty. Sweet tea finished. It was time. He reached for his wallet, opened it. Empty, by design. He patted his pockets. The performance he'd rehearsed 40 times, the widening eyes, the embarrassed exhale, the mumbled apology. I'm sorry. I think I left my cash in the car. Let me just..." He started to stand. Denise was already there. She didn't call Terry. She didn't glance around the restaurant. She picked up his guest check, $18.40, pulled the pen from behind her ear and wrote 3 words. "It's on me." She slid it across the table. "Don't worry about it. Everyone has a day like this." Raymond looked down. Blue ink on white paper. 40 restaurants. 4 months. Hundreds of servers. Not one had done this. "You don't know me," he said. His voice was quieter than he intended. "Why would you do that?" Denise looked at him, not through him, not past him, but at him. "I don't need to know you," she said. "You were hungry. You're here. That's enough." She turned and walked back toward table 5. Raymond didn't move for 6 minutes. The check was still in his hand, $18.40. She made maybe $28,000 a year. She'd just spent her own money to feed a stranger who would never come back, never thank her, never remember her name. He reached under the table, pulled out the notebook, opened it to page 41. 40 entries of failed stared at him from the pages before. He uncapped his pen and wrote one word: her. He closed the notebook. Then he ordered a slice of pie he didn't want, just to stay. The test was over. She'd passed. But Raymond had built companies long enough to know that one extraordinary person doesn't survive in an ordinary system by accident. Either the system protects them, or the system is trying to destroy them. At 3:40 p.m., a college kid came in, ordered a sandwich and a drink. When the check came, he counted out bills and coins and came up short by $2. His face reddened. Denise covered it. Again, without a word, without a pause. Raymond's jaw tightened. Twice in one shift. Then he heard it. Through the thin wall, Terry's voice on the phone, tense and clipped. "Phil, she's the best server I have. Can we just—" A pause. "Okay, Friday. I understand." Raymond's coffee had gone cold. His pie sat untouched. The best employee he'd seen in 41 restaurants was about to be fired. By his own company. For doing exactly what he'd spent 4 months searching for. His own system was the enemy. He left a $100 bill under the pie plate. Cash, untraceable. Walked to the parking lot, sat in the Buick, opened the notebook to page 41. Under her, he added 2 words. Fix this. He picked up his phone. "I need a meeting. Tomorrow morning. Durham. Bring everything you have on location 41. And get me the personnel file for a server named Denise Okafor." He hung up, looked back at the restaurant through the windshield. Inside, a woman in a faded apron was wiping down tables alone. She had no idea what was coming. 7 o'clock the next morning. A conference room at a Hampton Inn off Interstate 40. Beige walls, bad lighting, a coffee maker that took 4 minutes to brew 6 ounces. Raymond sat at the head of a table built for 12. Using it alone except for his attorney, David Wyatt, who'd driven down from Atlanta overnight with 2 boxes of files. The boxes were open now, paperwork spread across the table like evidence at a trial, because that's exactly what it was. "Start with her personnel file," Raymond said. David slid a manila folder across the table. Raymond opened it. Denise Okafor, hired 4 years ago. No complaints from customers. Not one in 4 years. Performance reviews exceeds expectations every quarter. Attendance, perfect. Not a single missed shift in 48 months. Then the warnings. 3 final warning forms, each printed on company letterhead with the Magnolia Table logo in the corner. Each one stamped with the same violation code. Unauthorized comp, server covered. Customer bill from personal funds. Raymond read the first one. Date, 14 months ago. Amount, $6.20. Denise had paid for a woman's breakfast when her credit card was declined. Phil Barker's signature at the bottom. Note, first offense, verbal counseling administered. The second. Date, 8 months ago. Amount, $9. A teenager's lunch. Phil's signature. Note, second offense, written warning issued. Employee advised that further violations may result in termination. The third. Date, 6 weeks ago. Amount, $4.75. A bowl of soup. Phil's signature. Note, third and final warning. Recommend immediate termination upon next occurrence. Employee is a repeat offender and represents a liability risk to the company. Raymond set the third form down on the table. He set it down gently, which was worse than slamming it. Liability risk, he said. The words came out flat like stones dropped into still water. There's more, David said. He pulled up Phil Barker's quarterly audit report on a laptop. A spreadsheet. Rows of numbers, location codes, variance flags. Location 41 had 3 red flags, all tagged to the same employee ID. Phil's notes in the margin. Repeat offender, chronic policy violation, recommend termination, clean separation, documentation supports cause. Raymond stared at the screen. Has Phil ever visited this location? David checked the travel logs. No, not once in 3 years. He's never met her. No. He's never watched her work. No. He's firing her from a spreadsheet. David didn't answer. He didn't need to. Raymond leaned back. The conference room hummed with the air conditioner and nothing else. He thought about what he'd seen yesterday. Denise covering 2 customers' bills in a single shift, moving between 9 tables without complaint, touching a crying woman's shoulder, making a toddler's mother laugh. He thought about the word he'd written in his notebook, her. Then he pulled out his phone. I want to meet the local manager, Terry Marshall, this morning. Tell her I'm a corporate consultant reviewing employee retention. Don't use my name. Terry arrived at 8:30. She was nervous. The kind of nervous that comes from managing a store that nobody at corporate remembers until something goes wrong. She sat across from Raymond and David. She didn't know she was sitting across from the man who owned the company. I want to ask about one of your servers, Raymond said. Denise Okafor. Terry's shoulders tightened. Is this about the comps? Tell me about them. Terry hesitated. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a Ziploc pouch. Inside, 11 guest checks. Old ones, creased, some stained with coffee rings. Each one in Denise's handwriting. Each one with some version of the same message. It's on me. On me today. Don't worry about it. It's on me. It's on me. I've been saving these, Terry said. Her voice was quieter now. Hiding them from Phil's audits. I know I shouldn't have, She looked at the checks spread across the table. I couldn't throw them away, it felt wrong. Raymond picked up each check, one by one, read the handwriting. Some had extra notes on the back. Hang in there, tomorrow's better, you're not alone. Small sentences written by a woman making $28,000 a year who was spending her own tip money to feed people she'd never see again. How much has she spent? Raymond asked. Total, out of her own pocket. Terry did the math in her head. Over 2 years? Maybe $400, $500. All from tips. Raymond placed the checks in a row next to Phil's termination recommendation. 11 acts of kindness on the left, 1 spreadsheet on the right. This, he said, tapping the checks, is what my company calls a liability. He closed the folder, looked at David. Get Phil Barker in Durham by tomorrow morning, and cancel Ridgewell. All of it. The sale is off. David blinked. Ray, the board deadline is... I know the deadline. The sale is off. I found what I was looking for. He picked up the check on the far left, the oldest one, faded, barely legible. 3 words in blue ink. It's on me. He held it up to the light like a man reading a contract worth more than $400 million. Get Phil here, tomorrow. I want him in that restaurant by 9. Terry looked between the 2 men. She still didn't know who Raymond was, but something in his voice made her sit up straighter. Is Denise in trouble? She asked. Raymond put the check down. No, he said. Denise is the only one who isn't. Friday morning, 8:45 a.m. Magnolia Table didn't open until 11, but every light in the building was on. Terry had called the staff in early. Mandatory meeting, no exceptions. She didn't explain why. She didn't know why. All she knew was that the corporate consultant from yesterday had asked her to gather everyone, and something in the way he said it made her understand that this wasn't a request. The dining room had been rearranged, tables pushed to the sides, chairs set up in rows facing the counter. Jason sat in the back scrolling his phone. 2 kitchen staff leaned against the wall near the dish station, arms crossed. Terry stood by the register, hands clasped, watching the door. Denise arrived at 8:52, apron already tied, pen behind her ear. She looked at the chairs, the rearranged tables, the faces of her coworkers. Something cold moved through her chest. Terry, what is this? Terry shook her head. I don't know, just sit down. Denise sat. She put her hands in her lap. Her server book was in her apron pocket. Amara's photo inside, the folded email from Phil tucked beside it. She thought about the college kid she'd covered for 2 days ago. She thought about Phil's warning. One more and you're done. She thought, this is it. They're letting me go. At exactly 9 a.m., the front door opened. The bell rang. Phil Barker walked in first. Denise had never seen him in person, but she recognized the type. Pressed shirt, leather portfolio, the particular walk of a man who manages things from far away and prefers it that way. He nodded at Terry. He didn't look at anyone else. Behind Phil, a second man entered, and the room shifted. He was wearing a dark suit, fitted, the kind of suit that costs more than a month's rent at Denise's apartment. His shoes were polished. His posture was different. Taller, heavier, like gravity had decided to take him seriously. On his wrist, a watch caught the fluorescent light. Not a Casio, not even close. Denise's eyes moved from the suit to the face. Her lips parted. She knew that face. She'd served that face meatloaf and sweet tea 2 days ago. She'd poured that face a black coffee and said, "Corner booth. You look like a corner booth kind of guy." She'd written 3 words on his guest check and covered his $18 bill from her own tips. Meatloaf guy? The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Raymond Alcott looked at her, and for the first time in 4 months, he smiled. "My name is Raymond Alcott," he said. "I'm the founder and CEO of Alcott Hospitality Group. I own Magnolia Table, all 41 locations." He paused, "including this one." The room went silent, not the polite kind, the kind where oxygen leaves and nobody remembers how to breathe. Jason's phone slipped out of his hand and hit the chair. Terry gripped the counter. The kitchen staff unfolded their arms. Phil Barker's leather portfolio froze halfway to the counter. His eyes darted to Raymond, then to Terry, then back to Raymond. A vein in his neck started to pulse. Raymond didn't sit down. He stood at the front of the room, between the staff and the register, and placed a manila folder on the counter. He opened it. "Mr. Barker, you filed 3 final warnings against a server at this location for, and I'm reading your words, unauthorized comps representing a liability risk to the company." Raymond looked up. "Walk me through them." Phil straightened. His voice came out rehearsed. "Sir, Company Policy Section 4.6 clearly states that servers are not authorized to—" "I know the policy," Raymond said. "I wrote it." He let that settle. "Tell me what she actually did." Phil glanced at Denise. She was sitting perfectly still, hands flat on her thighs, watching. She used personal funds to cover customer bills, on multiple occasions, without authorization. "How much? Total?" Phil checked his portfolio. "Approximately $460, over 2 years. $460. Raymond repeated the number like he was weighing it. "From her tips, her own money, to feed people who couldn't pay." He set down Phil's audit report, the spreadsheet, the red flags, the margin notes. "And your recommendation was termination." "It's a liability, sir. If every server—" "Have you ever visited this restaurant, Mr. Barker?" Phil blinked. The travel budget for regional, yes or no?" "No." "Have you ever met Denise Okafor before today?" "No, but her file—" "Her file." Raymond reached into the folder and pulled out a Ziploc pouch. 11 guest checks. He spread them across the counter one by one like a dealer laying cards, each one in Denise's handwriting. "It's on me. On me today. Don't worry about it. It's on me. It's on me." 11 times, Raymond said. 11 strangers she fed with her own money. And you, from 200 miles away, from a spreadsheet, from a desk you never left, you called her a liability. Phil's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Raymond picked up the termination recommendation, held it up so the room could see it. "Recommend immediate termination. Clean separation." "I spent 4 months visiting every restaurant I own," Raymond said. 41 locations. I sat in corner booths and ate meatloaf and pretended I couldn't pay. I was looking for one person, one, who would reach into their own pocket for a stranger. You know how many I found? He held up one finger. 1. Her. He pointed at Denise. The only person in 41 restaurants who did what I was looking for, and you were 3 days away from firing her." Phil's face had gone the color of old paper. His leather portfolio hung at his side like a dead thing. "Your employment with Alcott Hospitality Group is terminated, effective immediately," Raymond said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Your severance will be processed by end of week. Please leave before we continue." Phil stood there for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of a man realizing that the system he'd operated from, the reports, the policies, the distance, had just collapsed around him. He picked up his portfolio. He walked to the door. The bell rang once. Then it was quiet. Raymond turned to the room. The kitchen staff hadn't moved. Jason was staring at the floor. Terry's hand was over her mouth. Denise sat in her chair. She hadn't cried. She hadn't spoken. Her hands were still flat on her thighs. But something in her posture had changed. A shift so small that only someone who'd been watching her for 2 days would notice it. She was sitting up straighter. The bell stopped ringing. Phil's car pulled out of the parking lot. Nobody watched him go. Raymond pulled a chair from the nearest table, set it across from Denise, and sat down. Eye level. No podium, no distance. "I owe you an apology," he said. Denise blinked. Of everything she'd expected to hear today, "You're fired, you're suspended, sign here." An apology was not on the list. "My company built a policy that punished you for being kind. I wrote that policy. Section 4.6, unauthorized comps, termination after 3 warnings. He folded his hands. "That policy was designed to prevent theft. Instead, it punished generosity. That's my fault." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Official letterhead. He placed it on the table between them but didn't push it forward. "Before I show you this, I want to tell you something. When I was 16, I washed dishes at a diner in Atlanta. $6 an hour. The owner called me boy. One night a customer walked out on a $200 tab. The manager docked my pay. A dishwasher's pay. For a customer I never served, at a table I never touched." Denise was watching him. Something behind her eyes had opened, a door locked for a long time. "I stood at that register with empty pockets and nobody in the room who cared," Raymond said. "I swore that if I ever owned a restaurant, nobody would be punished for someone else's cruelty. Then I built 41 restaurants and let it happen anyway, because I stopped looking." He tapped the sheet of paper. "This is a general manager appointment letter. Your name is already on it." Jason looked up from the floor. Terry's hand dropped from her mouth. The kitchen staff exchanged a glance. Denise stared at the paper. She didn't touch it. "I'm a waitress, Mr. Alcott." "I was a dishwasher, Denise." The sentence landed like a handshake across 30 years. "You've been running this restaurant for 4 years," Raymond said. 9 tables while your coworker had 4. Every customer's name, every coffee order, every bad day. You spent your own money to feed strangers who would never come back." He leaned forward. "You've been the general manager since the day you started. You just didn't have the title." "You don't have to say yes," he added. "I'm asking, not telling." Denise looked at the appointment letter, then at Terry, who was crying now and not hiding it. Then at her own handwriting on the 11 checks still spread across the counter. "Yes," she said. Then, "But I have a condition. Terry stays, as assistant manager. She's been protecting me for 2 years, hiding those checks, arguing with Phil. She didn't have to. She did it anyway." Raymond looked at Terry. "Done. What else?" Something shifted in Denise's face. The expression of a woman realizing she was being listened to. Not tolerated, listened to. "That policy, Section 4.6, I want it rewritten. A compassion fund, $50 a month for every server, all 41 locations. Discretionary, no paperwork, no approval. If a customer can't pay and a server wants to cover it, they use the fund. No write-ups, no warnings, no one calling from a desk 200 miles away to say they're a liability for being decent." Raymond stared at her. Then he laughed. Not at her, from recognition. the kind that comes when you find something better than what you imagined. "You just designed the pilot program," he said. 11 checks in a drawer. That's what a compassion fund looks like before anyone gives it a name." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a blank guest check. He picked up her pen, the one from behind her ear, and wrote 3 words. "It's on you now." He slid it across the table. Denise looked down. Blue ink. 3 words. The mirror of every check she'd ever written, except these words weren't about carrying someone's burden. They were about carrying the whole thing. The restaurant, the staff, the future. She picked up the pen, signed the appointment letter. Terry clapped first, a single sharp clap that broke the silence. Then Jason, then the kitchen staff, then the room. Raymond shook her hand, held it a moment longer than business required. "That compassion fund. I'm rolling it out to all 41 locations by end of month. When they ask where it came from, I'll tell them it came from a waitress in Durham who spent $460 of her own money because she couldn't watch people go hungry." He paused. "You said you couldn't watch that. That's not a weakness, Denise. That's a qualification." She put the signed letter and the guest check in her apron pocket, next to Amara's photo, next to Phil's folded email. Then she picked up a coffee pot and walked onto the floor. Tables to set up. The restaurant opened in 2 hours, and for the first time in 4 years, it was hers. 6 months later, the bell above the door still rang. Same bell, same door, but the sound meant something different now. Magnolia Table, location 41, looked the same from the parking lot. Same strip mall, same peeling sign that Denise kept saying she'd get repainted and kept not getting around to. The laundromat was still next door. The check-cashing place had closed and been replaced by a nail salon. 4 cars in the lot had become 12. On a Friday night, it hit 18. Inside, one thing was new. A small chalkboard sign sat on the host stand, hand-lettered in Denise's handwriting. "Today's Compassion Fund, active. Ask your server." Behind the register, 2 framed guest checks hung side by side on the wall. The one on the left was old, faded ink, a coffee ring in the corner, 3 words in blue. "It's on me." The first one she ever wrote. The one on the right was newer, the ink still sharp. "It's on you now," the one Raymond wrote. Together they looked like a conversation, a question and an answer separated by 4 months and $400 million. Denise wore a manager's polo now, dark green, embroidered with her name and title. But the pen was still behind her ear. She couldn't break the habit. Terry joked about it every morning. "You're the GM, Denise. You've got a desk now. Use it." Denise always gave the same answer. "The desk isn't where the people are." On a Tuesday afternoon, a new server, a 20-year-old girl named Bria, first week, hands trembling every time she carried a full tray, came to Denise with a problem. A customer at table 4 couldn't cover his bill, short by $7. He was staring at his wallet like it had personally failed him. Bria's voice was thin. "What do I do? Do I call someone? Do I—" Denise pulled out a small card from the register drawer. Magnolia Table Compassion Fund. On the back, 1 sentence. "No approval needed. No paperwork. No questions." "You don't need permission to be kind," Denise said. "That's the whole policy." Bria stared at the card. "Really? I can just—" "You can just." Bria walked back to table 4. She picked up the check, wrote something at the bottom, and placed it in front of the man. He looked down. His shoulders dropped, not from weight, but from the sudden absence of it. Denise watched from the register. She didn't see what Bria wrote. She didn't need to. Terry ran the schedule now. It was posted 2 weeks in advance, behind a clear acrylic frame on the break room wall. Every server could see every shift. No yellow highlights, no hidden patterns. Terry had built a rotation system so simple and transparent that new hires understood it on day 1. She laughed about the old days sometimes. "I used to hide guest checks in a drawer like contraband. Now we frame them on the wall." On a Thursday, Mr. Davis, the old regular, 2 sugars, splash of cream, came in for lunch. He'd been coming every week for 3 years. He sat at his usual spot. Denise brought his coffee before he sat down. 2 sugars, splash of cream, he said. Have I ever gotten it wrong? He sipped, set the cup down, looked at the framed checks behind the register, then at Denise's new polo, then back at his coffee. My granddaughter's applying for a job, he said. I told her to come here. Not because of the food. He took another sip. Because of you. Denise didn't answer. She just refilled his water and moved to the next table. Location 41's revenue was up 340%. Not because of a marketing campaign or a menu overhaul. Because word had spread. The quiet, stubborn, persistent kind of word of mouth that no algorithm can manufacture and no ad can buy. There's a restaurant in Durham where they actually care. On an evening in late October, the bell rang. Denise was in the back office reviewing next week's schedule when Terry's head popped through the doorway. Corner booth, Terry said. There was something in her voice, a held-back smile, the kind that vibrates. Denise walked onto the floor. The corner booth, cracked vinyl, same crack, she kept meaning to fix it, was occupied. A black man in a dark suit sat with his hands folded on the table. On the table's edge, a small brass plate had been screwed in at some point during the renovation Denise hadn't authorized and couldn't explain. It read, Reserved, the meatloaf guy. Raymond looked up. I didn't order yet, but I think you know what I want. Denise brought meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and sweet tea. She set them down without a word. Then she sat across from him in the corner booth. The GM sitting with the CEO, 2 people who'd found each other at the right time in the wrong restaurant. They didn't talk for a while. They didn't need to. The dining room hummed around them. Forks on plates, Bria's nervous laugh as she balanced a tray, Terry calling an order to the kitchen, the bell ringing as someone new walked in. Raymond reached into his jacket, pulled out the leather notebook. He opened it to page 41. Denise saw her page. Her. Fix this. Fix everything. 3 entries in Raymond's handwriting. Below them, he uncapped his pen and wrote one final word. Done. He closed the notebook, slid it across the table. You might need this someday, he said, when you're looking for your person. Denise took the notebook, held it with both hands, ran her thumb across the leather cover. 41 pages of searching, 4 months of meatloaf. One word that changed everything. She put it in her apron pocket, next to the pen, next to Amara's photo, next to Phil's folded email that she still hadn't thrown away. Not out of anger, but as a reminder of what almost happened and didn't. Thank you, she said. Raymond picked up his fork. Thank the meatloaf. Denise Okafor made general manager within her first month. Within 6, Location 41 went from the lowest revenue store in the chain to number 7. Within a year, it was number 3. Not because of a new menu, not because of a renovation, because of a chalkboard sign that said, Compassion Fund, active, and a woman behind the register who remembered how you took your coffee. The Compassion Fund rolled out to all 41 locations by the end of that first month. Average monthly use per server, $38. Customer satisfaction across the chain rose 22%. The thing Phil Barker called a liability became the brand. Magnolia tables started receiving applications from servers at competing restaurants. People who'd heard that there was a chain where you didn't get fired for being kind. Ridgewell Capital's offer expired on a Monday. Raymond didn't sign. The board didn't push. When they saw Location 41's numbers, they stopped talking about selling and started asking what Denise was doing differently. Raymond's answer was always the same. She's not doing anything differently. She's doing what she's always done. We just stopped punishing her for it. Phil Barker's termination was processed quietly. No lawsuit, no press. He landed at a regional fast food chain 3 months later. His new company used ordering tablets instead of servers. There was no Compassion Fund. There was no Denise. Terry Marshall ran the tightest schedule in the Southeast District. Bria, the nervous new server from her first week, was now training new hires herself. She kept a compassion fund card in her apron at all times. "You don't need permission to be kind," she told every new server on their first day. She'd learned that line from someone. The leather notebook sat in Denise's desk drawer. 41 pages, 40 failed, 1 her, and 1 blank page, page 42, waiting for the day Denise would start her own search. The corner booth still had the cracked vinyl. The brass plate still read, "Reserved, the meatloaf guy." And behind the register, 2 guest checks hung side by side in matching frames. One that said, "It's on me." One that said, "It's on you now." On a quiet Tuesday after the lunch rush, Denise walked past the register and stopped. She looked at those 2 checks, her handwriting and Raymond's, blue ink on white paper, separated by everything and connected by the one thing that mattered. She pulled the pen from behind her ear, took a blank guest check from the stack, wrote 3 words, slid it into the notebook, page 42. "It's on me." The next search had already begun. If you know someone who gives more than they'll ever get credit for, tag them below. If you're that person, the one covering shifts, paying tabs, writing kind words no one asked for, keep going. You never know who's sitting in the corner booth. And if this story made you think of someone who deserves better, send it to them. Subscribe if you believe the people who deserve power are the ones who never ask for it.
"41 restaurants, 4 months, and the only person who passed Raymond's test was 3 days away from being fined for it. You know what Raymond was looking for? Skill, experience, a perfect resume. He was looking for a reflex. What someone does when a stranger is in trouble and nobody's going to reward them for helping. 40 servers had a reason not to help, and none of them were wrong. But Denise, making $28,000 a year, never once did a math. She just wrote, "It's on me," and went back to pouring coffee. And that's the thing. Kindness isn't about what you can afford. It's about what you refuse to look away from. The system called her a liability. Raymond called her a leader. Same woman, same action. The only thing that changed was who was paying attention. And that makes me wonder, how many people out there are being punished right now for doing the right thing? How many times have you helped someone knowing it would cost you, and the only thing the world noticed was that it cost? If you've been that person, tell me your story in the comments and share this with someone who gives more than they would ever get credit for. Subscribe, because next week's story will hit even harder. You don't need permission to be kind. That's the whole policy.